I used to think that having routines meant life was well ordered, a sign of stability and happiness. There was comfort in the predictability of waking up, making coffee, and hearing my son's laughter echo down the hall. Those simple, warm moments defined my idea of a complete life. This morning felt no different. At least that's what I believed. The golden light of sunrise poured through the kitchen window, casting everything in a soft glow. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the crisp aroma of toast popping up from the toaster. As I stood at the counter slicing apples for my son Caleb, I listened for his familiar chatter from the hallway. "Dad, are you coming to my game today?" he called out. I turned, seeing my 8-year-old standing at the doorway, adjusting the collar of his baseball uniform. His sandy brown hair, still damp from his shower, stuck up in messy tufts, something Lauren would surely scold me for not fixing. His wide, hopeful brown eyes made my stomach tighten. I hesitated. I'd promised him last week, but today Lauren insisted on making dinner, something she rarely did, and her insistence carried a weight I couldn't quite identify. Forcing a smile, I reached over to smooth down his hair. "Of course, buddy. I wouldn't miss it for the world." His immediate smile made everything feel right, if only for a moment. But then Lauren's footsteps approached. She entered the kitchen with her usual grace, dressed in a cream-colored blouse and tailored black slacks, her work attire for the flower shop she owned, Petals and Grace. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her flawless makeup enhanced her poised appearance. She gave me a lingering look before glancing at Caleb. "Breakfast first, then your game," she said coolly. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it was distant, just detached enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck. I'd noticed it more often lately, the way she moved through our home like a guest, as if we were two people coexisting on memories rather than emotions. Caleb, oblivious to the tension, climbed onto a stool and grabbed his toast. "Dad's coming to my game today," he announced excitedly. Lauren's expression remained unreadable as she poured coffee. "That's nice," she murmured. The conversation should have flowed from there. Caleb usually launched into his game strategy, and I'd chime in with encouragement. But silence stretched between us instead. I cleared my throat. "You're making dinner tonight?" Lauren didn't look up. "Yes." One word, no excitement, no warmth. "What's the occasion?" Finally, she met my gaze, her deep brown eyes unreadable. "Just thought it would be nice." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach. Her eyes. That subtle feeling of unease settled deeper in my chest. We'd been married for 10 years, and I knew Lauren well enough to recognize when something was off. She wasn't one to cook elaborate meals without reason, usually only for special events like birthdays or anniversaries. But tonight, there was no occasion. That thought stayed with me as we moved through our morning. By the time I dropped Caleb off at school, my mind was already spinning through the past few months, trying to figure out when this distance between us had started. At first, I chalked it up to grief. Her mother's sudden death 6 months ago had hit her hard, though she never openly mourned. But then other things started happening. Lauren began taking more frequent trips to the city, supposedly for inventory, shopping at the flower market. She started leaving the house early and coming home late. Her phone, once carelessly left on counters or tables, was always with her now, screen tilted away when I was near. And the spending, new designer bags, an expensive watch, a perfume I'd never seen before, seemed out of character for someone usually so practical. I'd asked about it once. "Just treating myself," she said lightly. "It's nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. When I pulled into the office parking lot, I told myself I was overthinking. But that evening, as I drove home after work, I still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Lauren's text, "Be home by 7, dinner will be ready," replayed in my mind. She never waited for me to get home for dinner. And for the first time, I wondered if she was making sure I'd be there. The house felt different when I arrived. Through the window, I saw the dining table set with our good china and candles flickering softly. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The scent of clam chowder and freshly baked bread filled the air. Lauren stood in the kitchen, ladling soup into bowls with a calm, practiced precision. When she turned and saw me, she smiled. "You're on time," she said. "You went all out," I replied. "I just wanted us to have a nice evening," she said smoothly. Caleb ran down the stairs, eyes lighting up at the sight of the table. "Are we celebrating something?" he asked eagerly. "Nope," Lauren answered, her voice warm but careful. "Just something special." We sat down and I hesitated before taking a bite of soup. It was delicious, but with every swallow, my unease grew. Lauren wasn't eating, just watching. When I looked up, she caught my gaze and quickly took a slow, deliberate sip from her spoon. Then Caleb's spoon clattered against his bowl. "Dad, I don't feel so good," he whispered. His face had gone pale, his small hands gripping the edge of the table for support. Panic surged through me, but as I tried to stand, my vision blurred and my limbs grew heavy. I slumped back into my chair, barely able to register Caleb's whimper before his body sagged sideways. Through the haze, I saw Lauren still sitting there, calm and composed. Her phone rang, and she answered it. "It's done," she said softly. "They'll both be gone soon." My heart pounded in my chest. Lauren, my wife, my partner of 10 years, had just sentenced us to die. But through the darkness creeping at the edges of my vision, I saw Caleb's eyelids flutter just slightly. He wasn't unconscious. Smart boy, he was pretending. And I realized if we were going to survive, I needed to do the same. A surge of fear rushed through me as I forced my fingers to curl. Slow, unsteady, but moving. Lauren's footsteps echoed down the hallway as she left the room, and I waited, holding my breath until I heard the door to her study click shut. Only then did I dare turn to Caleb and whisper, "Don't move yet." His tiny hand twitched, slightly in acknowledgement. We were still alive. But for how much longer, I didn't know. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. I never thought I'd have to play dead to survive my own wife. Lying on the cold dining room floor, I forced every muscle to remain still, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. The warm candlelight flickered, casting eerie shadows of me and my son, our still forms lying in unnatural silence. A part of me wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. Across the room, Caleb lay motionless. His small chest rose and fell so faintly it was barely perceptible. My 8-year-old son had the presence of mind to play along. No crying, no fidgeting, no sign that we were still alive. I was so proud of him and so terrified for him. In the distance, I heard Lauren's voice, smooth and controlled as she spoke on the phone. "Yes, everything is in place. No, they won't be a problem anymore. I'll finish up here and meet you later." The words sent a chill through me. There was no hesitation, no regret, just cold certainty. The woman I'd loved for 10 years had just tried to kill us. I fought the nausea rising in my stomach, my body still sluggish from whatever she'd put in our food. The dizziness was less severe now, but my limbs remained heavy, refusing to fully obey me. Lauren's soft footsteps moved closer, her heels clicking lightly on the hardwood. I could smell the faint hint of her perfume, a scent I had once loved but now filled me with dread. I kept my breathing shallow and controlled. If she came closer, if she so much as checked for a pulse, it would all be over. Then her footsteps retreated and a door clicked shut. My heart pounded as I opened my eyes just enough to scan the room. The dining table stood in perfect stillness. the expensive plates and barely touched food arranged as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I turned my head slightly. Toward Caleb, my vision still hazy. His tiny fingers twitched, a barely noticeable movement. But I caught it. Smart boy. We couldn't move yet, not while Lauren was still in the house. From somewhere down the hall, I heard drawers opening and closing, papers rustling, and the soft hum of a shredder. She was covering her tracks. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was methodical, cold, and planned down to the last detail. She was destroying evidence, making sure that when our bodies were found, it wouldn't look like murder. Fury burned beneath my skin. I had spent a decade building a life with this woman, loving her, trusting her, and now I was just an obstacle. My body was still weak, but my mind sharpened with every passing second. I needed to act. Lauren's voice drifted from the hallway, urgent and hushed. The money transfer is already done. I made sure of it this morning. I'll be out of here soon. She was leaving. Whatever she had planned, it was almost complete. I took a slow, deep breath and turned my focus to Caleb. With painstaking effort, I curled my fingers and tapped his arm, just once. He tensed, but didn't move. Good. He understood. The sound of running water echoed from the kitchen. Lauren cleaning up, making sure there was no trace of the poison she had used. We couldn't wait any longer. I shifted, testing my legs. Still weak, but the heaviness was lifting. Carefully, I pushed up onto my elbows. The room spun before settling. Across from me, Caleb's eyes cracked open just enough to meet mine. He was scared, but he was ready. One slow, controlled movement at a time, I crawled toward him. His small hand reached for mine, gripping tight. His pulse raced, but he didn't panic. We had to move. I scanned the hallway, no sign of Lauren. I motioned for Caleb to follow, keeping low as we moved toward the study. The sound of the shredder had stopped. The house was silent except for the faint running water. Inside the study, the desk lamp cast a golden glow across the room. My phone sat beside the shredder. My hand shook as I grabbed it and dialed 911. My wife poisoned me and my son, I whispered. We need help. The operator's response was immediate, her voice urgent. Sir, are you in immediate danger? Yes, she's still in the house. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned. Lauren stood in the doorway, a knife gleaming. In her hand. For a second, she didn't move. Then she smiled. It wasn't a smile of love or regret. It was the smile of someone who knew the game had just changed. The real danger had only just begun. His phone and tapped into his banking app. A beat of silence, then another, and then, son of a... He cut himself off, exhaling sharply through his nose, his face dark with anger. She took it, he said, his hands clenching into fists. She took Mom's inheritance. Lauren had planned this for months. She had studied us. She had known exactly how to dismantle our lives piece by piece, like a chessboard she had been controlling. From the start. I clenched my jaw, my breathing uneven. She wanted us dead, I said, my voice low, and when that failed, she made sure we had nothing left. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. Okay, he muttered. Okay, we can fix this. We'll call the bank. Get the transactions reversed. I shook my head. No. He stopped pacing. What do you mean, no? I exhaled slowly. Lauren wouldn't have done this unless she was sure it couldn't be traced back to her. She wasn't just a criminal, she was smart, and that makes her more dangerous than ever. Ryan's nostrils flared. So what are we supposed to do? Just let her get away with it? I glanced at Caleb, still tucked under my arm, his small hands gripping my shirt. No, I said. We fight back. Ryan narrowed his eyes. How? I turned back to the laptop. my fingers moving across the keyboard as I pulled up the account transaction history. Lauren was careful, but she wasn't perfect. She had transferred the money somewhere, and if I could find where, Ryan leaned over, watching as I scrolled. Then a name appeared. One I recognized immediately, Sarah Collins. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. Who the hell is Sarah Collins? I clenched my jaw. Her partner. His eyes widened. You mean the woman she was having an affair with? I confirmed with a nod. He exhaled sharply. You've got to be kidding me. But I wasn't. Lauren hadn't just drained my accounts. She had transferred everything to Sarah, every last cent. This wasn't just about money. This was about revenge. Lauren knew she was. Going to prison, she knew she was losing, so she made sure I lost too. Ryan rubbed a hand over his face. Okay, so what do we do? I stared at the screen, then made a decision. A real, final decision. I met his gaze. We go after her. Ryan's eyebrows lifted. You mean Sarah? I nodded. If Lauren was smart enough to wipe our accounts, she was smart enough to cover her tracks. The police are going to take their time. They'll need investigations, search, warrants, and by the time they get them, that money will be long gone. Ryan swallowed. So, you're saying? I turned back to the laptop. We don't wait. Lauren had thought she could bury us. She had thought she'd won. She was wrong. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not her and not Sarah. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about payback. Now in the end, please share.